Chapter 7. Helen opened the trunk of her car, all packed with groceries. The drinks can go in first, she thought, picking up the double-bagged handles for the juice and soda pop. She made her way up her front steps. A little unpacking, a shower, and then she could start preparing a quiet dinner by the time Kyle arrived home. Tonight she would be making his favorite, chicken marsala, and she would surprise him when he came through the door. Helen fumbled with the mail as she figured out her door key from her overloaded keychain. She opened the door, balancing the mail, the bags, and her keys all at once. Opening the door, she was surprised to hear the TV on. Housewife raped in suburbia. Hundreds killed in earthquake. Priest found guilty in... Kyle? Kyle, is that you? Honey? Helen could hear the TV, which could only mean that Kyle was home early, but she heard no response. She listened again, but could hear only silence. She began setting the bags down on the couch and hung the keys on the stand in the hallway. By this time, she could hear clinking in the fridge and figured he must be making himself a snack. So she took her time, hanging up her overcoat and slipping off her shoes, sore from a day on her feet. Kyle? She walked into the kitchen, but was surprised to see a man dressed in white rooting through her refrigerator. You know, our fridge packed to the rafters and not one fucking drop of milk. I sure hope you brought some. The strange man spun around, causing Helen to gasp when she realized it was not her husband. Her bottles crashed to the floor, the glass shattering at her feet. His face was like a skeleton, with a thin layer of skin on top. His drawn-back tight smile was like a mannequin, with his upper lip almost non-existent, like it had been cut off. Just a bony Joker smile, his eyes like two blackened pits, gleaming at the sight of her. Who the fuck are you? Oh, me, just your friendly neighborhood milkman. Here to fill up your pussy with about 3 quarts, regular, or will it be pasteurized? Helen gasped again as she slowly stepped back. She found a larger key with her fingers and held it up behind her like a knife. Get the fuck out of my house. My cock is hard, Helen. What do you say we skip the cuddling tonight? I've got a ton of milk stored up in here for you. It was you, wasn't it? The one that spoke to Ben before his stroke. He lunged forward and grabbed her by the waist, forcing it up and down his groin. He started a grotesque orgasmic groan as he forced her hand up and down his shaft. Helen's face had turned a putrid green in horror. His quivering moaning was cut off suddenly as Helen plunged the car key into his jugular. The milkman staggered back, releasing her. His moaning turned to a bubbling, choking noise as he moved his hand up to his neck. A thick black ooze like sludge was pouring down his clean white shirt. He grasped the key with one steady tug, pried the key out. His face had turned to a menacing snarl. Helen had fallen to her back. She turned over and was crawling towards the front door. She wanted to scream, but could only cry. She wanted to run as fast as she could, but felt like she was trapped in slow motion, like running in quicksand. She could feel him bearing down on her, pinning her to the ground. As he hiked up her dress, he ripped down her underwear, revealing her toned and tight ass. She felt his weight lower onto her as he prepared to mount her. No lubricant, Helen. I know you've been saving yourself for Kyle. The milkman unzipped his cock and plunged it into Helen's ass as she shrieked in pain. He thrust it deeper into her, beginning his orgasmic groaning all over again, like a deranged hyena, pounding her more rapidly each passing minute. Helen could do little but scream and cry. 10 minutes went by, 20, 30. Still he did not stop the grinding. She started praying he would just come, and maybe then he would leave her alone. But he did not stop. Like a rabid animal frothing at the mouth, he became more and more deranged. He whispered in her ear, "Feel the devil's cock, Helen." I know you've always wanted it, from the time you first reached puberty. I've heard your prayers, Helen. I know everything, Helen. Do you want to know what true horror is, Helen? It's not gore, not rape, not even murder. It's our thoughts. Perception is reality, Helen. But our thoughts govern our perception. Our thoughts, our beliefs, will create and shape our reality. This is where the true horror begins. Control a person's beliefs and you can reshape their whole world. The milkman withdrew his cock and rose to his feet. Helen lay sobbing on the floor. He reached down with one hand and picked her 2 feet off the ground by the neck. He glared at her with emotionless apathy and bashed her head against the wall, sending family portraits crashing to the ground. He then dragged her by the bloody hair to the bedroom. Ah, the dream factory. Slamming the door behind him. Helen's face was split open. Blackish red blood poured from end to end. Bits of broken glass embedded in her cheeks and forehead. She was choking and gurgling on her own blood, coughing and spewing bile from her shattered teeth, just to allow herself a chance to breathe. Alone at last. He threw her onto the bed. As he climbed up alongside her, he mounted her face next, plunging his cock in and out of her mouth. Helen started gagging on the length of his cock and her own blood. His penis was ramming the back of her throat and forcing its way further into her mouth. Helen made a gurgling noise as she struggled to breathe. Now lick my balls, bitch. I must be hitting every single fucking red light in town, Kyle thought to himself. He kept dialing Helen's phone number frantically on his cell, but got nothing but voicemail. He had to keep wiping the beads of sweat from his brow that kept dripping into his eyes. Meanwhile, Kyle, you are a lucky, lucky man. And what the fuck am I talking about? I'm the lucky man now. It had to be a nightmare, thought Helen, but it just kept going on and on. She considered biting his cock off, but just prayed it would all end soon. Now, darling, I think we've had enough foreplay. I'm ready for some good old-fashioned pussy. He brought her to the edge of the bed and began fucking her standing up. Still wearing his fuel uniform, he adjusted his cap while thrusting himself inside of her, just his cock unzipped, inserted into her vagina. The bed shook as he continued the pounding. She was more horrified to find her pussy beginning to respond to his cock, powerless from what her mind was begging to tell it, grasping onto it with contractions, squeezing it tighter. That's it, Helen. Come all over my cock. I want to hear you groan, Helen. The best cock you've ever had. Helen tried to fight it, but felt her pussy start to spasm as it climaxed all over his shaft. Yes, yes, Helen. Come all over my cock. Come for me, bitch. Come for the master. It was so intense she had no choice but to feel her neck arch and body quiver. He let her enjoy it for a second or two, and then reached over and ripped her right breast clean off with his hand that now resembled more of an animal claw. A fat chunk of flesh tumbled out of her torso as the bed became soaked with crimson. Now feel my cum, bitch. Feel the devil's cum. His cock began to twitch inside of her. She could feel him erupting, sending his warm sperm deep into her wound. Helen blacked out.